Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. DUANE the Great Writer and Seer.
On numerous occasions, I have made mention of a position that can be assumed that I refer to as the in-between state. The real awareness that we each actually are is a part of the isness everything reality, in essence then a true reality awareness that animates through all consciousness, the ideas of which effect multi-dimensional creation. The real awareness then has the complete overview of everything transpiring simulator-wise, but that which the personal created self has revealed to it is according to what makes sense with life, which view is most conducive moment by moment, that facilitates ever greater awareness becoming. That is assuming the real awareness has indeed decided to recognize the all-is it is a part of, and that the personal self-creation is on board with the process and not mounting resistance through the ideas, agreements, and attachments it holds to that limit the extent to which full accessibility to everything creational is available for its consideration and comparison. Essentially, although everything, every dimensional position and possible viewpoint is present in the nowness of the isness real awareness, from the personal self perspective, so the mechanics of creation afford the illusion of segregation, of separation, and differentiation of lifetimes, dimensions, and life levels. The personal self is essential, as it presents as a reality all its own, but a reality which isn't that which the all is, a fabricated personal self-creational reality, which embodies isolated parts and pieces, ideas encapsulated through a consciousness-affected body forms, and the dimensions they decode into simulated experiences and lifetimes. And this then affords comparison between the two positions, that of the personal self and the ideas created in their segregation from the whole, and the real awareness isness everything, which ultimately, if the intent is there, eventual realization of the difference is discerned, and recognition of the true reality is determined accordingly. From the personal self perspective, there are two general viewpoint positions available: the physical level, afforded via the physical body vehicle, which has the facility of decoding the ideas that are the physical in its base state into a simulation, and the real side, the dimensions of creation aside from the physical level. The best applicable analogy being the wearing of a virtual reality headset that provides a particular game, the physical level, and as we remove the headset, we are liberated from the limits that the game presents as, and the potential exploration of multi-dimensional creation is available. There is, however, another position, as I mentioned in the beginning, that of the in-between state, aptly referenced, for it is a point between the two positions, that of the physical and the real side, that everyone will experience, as this is the transitionary phase between the physical and what lies beyond it, between wakefulness and sleep, the moment where we ease free of the virtual reality headset. From my astral projection days, part of my practice involved a perpetuation of this between state. I would prolong the transitionary period and indeed maintain it, as I found this the most conducive mechanism by which out-of-body experiences could be achieved. Just prior to sleep, the endless conscious thought activations must cease. In essence, we place the mind and emotions aside, that we can be removed from the physical level affording physical level body form apparatus. But possible is it to prevent the complete transition to the real side, and to remain on the threshold straddling the two positions, if we maintain a state of non-activation of thought and emotion. In such a between state, the physical level will be retained as the overall simulated scene, but certain features, and indeed body forms, operating in their own respective real side dimensions, can present themselves, as though, rather than fully remove the virtual reality headset, we are retaining it to a degree, but peeking out from under it also, that we have a combination of the physical and real side phenomena as our experience. And I've shared over the years the numerous encounters with body forms during this between state position. From their perspective, they would be positioned wherever they happened to be other dimensionally, and be engaging with me there, as we each are multi-dimensional. But from the perspective of my personal self, they would be manifesting on the physical. Sometimes such beings will be in a realization of this, oftentimes they will not, but regardless, this is another viable means of contact with other body types, and the experiences that spin off from them accordingly. In this case, as I found myself lingering on the threshold of sleep, between the real side and the physical, which is rather an automatic habitual occurrence, the real side bleed over that would feature would be an animal body type, that although I wasn't afforded the visual of whatever the creature was, audible clues were provided, as it would seem to be circling where I lay, and making snuffling sounds, accompanied by a tingling sound. That impression suggested was a collar with a small bell attached to it. The body form was that of a dog, and its prowling would be interspersed with moments where it would lay upon me, as I would feel the weight of its body. The personal self had the notion that perhaps this was one of the various pet dogs of the household that had transitioned over the decades, and so I would project thought forms to the animal, that of the names of all the dogs that had resided in the house over the years, but none elicited reaction that would indicate this was indeed a deceased pet. The dog was rather persistent, unceasing in its circling and sitting on top of me, evidently vying for my attention, as many of the body forms that feature during these between-state experiences tend to be. Usually then, I will cross the threshold, so to speak, and remove my awareness of view from the physical entirely and onto the real side, and generally find myself in the midst of the body form that was seeking my attention, and within the dimensional environment it hails from. In this case, however, I had the sense of ensuring that I make other dimensional contact with this dog, for sometimes, as I transition to the real side, I don't always manage to follow the body type successfully to its respective dimensional position, and find myself elsewhere, and where invariably another experience will unfold. And so, rather than vacate the physical vehicle, I activated an astral projection from it. The impressions were that the dog resided on the astral, and this was the most assured means that contact could be established. For me, when I project, the physical position I project from will be recreated on whichever dimension I have projected to, generally the astral, but recreated only to a point. There will be a threshold that if crossed, so I will find myself fully then on the astral, or whichever dimension it happens to be. My recreated launching point would always comprise of my house, and a certain proportion of the streets surrounding it, a kind of physical level overlap, and where I must proceed beyond the boundary of it to access the dimension I now am operating in. And so I would find myself in my recreated physical level house, though unlike real side experiences, where the representation is that of the consciousness. In this case, it is a phenomena of astral or out-of-body projecting, that of the recreation of the immediate physical area surrounding the position where I projected from. At least, this is my experience of astral projection. It may not be so for all. Going downstairs, I would encounter then the very dog that was attempting to glean my attention, utilizing astral projection as the method of ensuring a contact had indeed been a prudent choice. The dog was a fairly large breed, a black-furred body form, indeed possessing of a collar sporting a small bell, and was in the company and keeping of a woman present in the living-room. It seemed this woman sought an audience with me, but it was her dog that had tracked me down, so to say, and through its persistence, so had I been brought into her presence. She required my assistance with an operation of great importance, as according to her, I have shared on a number of previous real-side experiences that through the unlimited abilities we can muster via the real awareness as we go about our real-side activities, this may draw the attention and notice of others. That through the restrictions they hold to that limit their abilities, so they seek our aid in assisting them with that which they cannot do themselves. I am rather open to such requests, as these tend to present as further opportunities where our projects and the sharing of the new you and all its pertaining references are concerned. I would ask her name, and although she provided it, I failed to recollect and bring it back to the physical. It was rather exotic and other-worldly, that although she appeared to be a human in her 40s, suggested she was perhaps other than what she outwardly seemed. She also had an assumed function or role. How she referenced it didn't make much sense to my personal self. Something in relation to animals, along the lines of a guardian of animal body types throughout creation. She would provide now as though a presentation of that which she desired my assistance in regards to, and this would take the form of a series of DVDs that she would place in the house DVD player and TV set. Unveiled, not unlike a History Channel documentary, would be the rise of an evil, ill-intended tyrant who had taken possession of a certain region of creation, his will and dominance enforced via a vast horde of agreeable soldiers and minions. He and his ilk boasted advanced levels of technology. Their body forms were bipedal, along the reptilian lines, and although evidently operating in ways that were destructive, impressions suggested he and his horde were not directly affiliated with the Dark Force overall simulator controllers, more that he was independently operating, and this was simply how he chose to be in creation, his consciousness a construct of a dominating bent. The presentation spanned seemingly for several hours, and I would mention to the woman that my presence was made possible via an astral projection, and generally we have but a relatively brief duration until we are drawn back into the physical body and the out-of-body experience is concluded. And so, necessary was it for me to focus on the projected-to position I was in, that I be retained there far longer than I ever had been before on any previous out-of-body excursion. With the documentary complete, I would agree to afford my assistance, impressions revealing there to be beneficial merit in aiding the woman's cause. As I mentioned earlier, to fully be operating on the astral, beyond the recreated physical launch area, requires moving beyond its boundary. But instead of traversing from the house to the boundary, the limit of the recreated street, we would both float upwards instead. The same principle applied, that of breaching the recreated boundary, which extends upwards and downwards additionally. I would find myself now in another location, presumably the astral, but this I can't confidently substantiate, positioned with a large number of again what appeared on the surface as humans, in a kind of high-tech military bunker. The bunker was strategically placed within the dimensional territory the ill-intended warlord had claimed, that which was subjected to his tyranny, and where launched from could be the mechanism of his removal. For I would be met now with what would effectively be the payload, so to speak, though in the form of another human, a male. A curious situation, but this male, of the approximate age of mid-20s, I would estimate, was to be launched like a rocket, and as he impacted a certain area of the dimension we were in, so the evil tyrant would be toppled and defeated, his tyranny and taint be removed. Evidently this male was more than he appeared to be, as though he exuded a certain frequency or essence, that by virtue of his mere presence, so could a certain untoward distortion of ideas made a simulation manifest be unravelled. Oftentimes we are involved in removing certain of the ideas of the dark forces and the ill-intended on the real side, as though we are the delivery mechanism of their induced karmic consequence. For all ideas of a destructive nature will implode in on themselves, everything equalling itself as it does, and where we can nip the idea in the bud, so to speak, before it effects its destructive nature, delivering the karmic consequence prior to the devastation it would have wrought, as opposed to the effect penalty being experienced after the damage has been done. This seemed to be along these lines that this male was a mechanism of idea dismantling, as though it were his decided function. Although he seemed somewhat unnerved by the whole affair and the role expected of him, impressions revealing he himself couldn't be harmed, and these were assurances I would give him, as he seemed unaware as to his invulnerability. If he had performed such a function before wasn't made apparent, but if he had, surely he would realize as to his indestructible nature. Perhaps he retained no memory references, or the ability to access them as to his previous objectives, for I had the impression he and every humanoid present were those operating strictly as the personal self-consciousness, with no realization of their real awareness or the true reality it is a part of. So maybe this was a factor explaining his inability to recall his prior missions. As I mentioned, potentially then there was opportunity where the presenting of the real is pertaining references were concerned, that once I afforded the assistance required of me, I would be in the good graces of the woman who had initiated contact and her associates, and where they would undoubtedly be more receptive to what I would then convey in regards to the real purpose of his recognition, etc. For the large group of humanoids and myself would now enter a particular section of the complex, which would begin to ascend to a level above. As the platform terminated, what met my gaze was the environment surrounding the structure, a blue sky above, and surrounded by an expanse of ocean on all sides. This was the position the human idea dismantling torpedo had to be launched from, but there was a delicate series of technological preparations that seemingly had to take place first. The tyrant was aware of our presence and our intentions, and the moment we positioned ourselves atop the complex to commence the idea nullifying calibrations, he would unleash his horde upon our position to destroy all the humanoids and prevent the operation from taking place. This was anticipated, and all humanoids, me included, were equipped with sophisticated laser guns designed to repel the expected attack. The horde emerged from the waters surrounding us, visibly presenting as insectoid and reptilian body forms, but interestingly also would there be distorted amalgamations of reptilian or insect forms meshed with high-ranking Earth-based politicians. I recollect seeing numbers of former President Obama's, for example, his distinctive features interwoven with the reptilian or insect body type it was a part of. These twisted forms were very formidable, and were adept at dispatching the humans attempting to defend our position with the laser blasters. This is where my assistance was required. The awareness process involves a releasing of all ideas of the consciousness, that absent of any idea held to, we can be the effects of nothing unless we consciously choose to be. This would include the ideas that are the intentions and desired actions of others, that for a body type to have any detrimental impact upon me requires my agreement, my holding to the idea that this can be so. Absent of such agreement, and despite the assailants' best efforts, they will be unsuccessful in administering harm of destruction upon me. It seemed that however such agreements were secured, they were indeed present with the humanoids, that rendered them susceptible and vulnerable to the attacking twisted horde. The outcome of any decided altercation being agreement dependent, and the particular arrangement of agreement ideas as shared between the horde and the humanoids dictated a simulated consequence where the humanoids were being readily dispatched. Time was required for the technical calculations for the launching of the human idea dismantling a torpedo, but where the humanoids were unable to provide this, as they fell to the mass of reptilians and insectoids, as I lacked the agreements that the humanoids harboured in relation to the tyrant's attacking forces, so I could not share the effects as experienced by the humanoids, that of eradication. I would effectively be the last man standing, as it were. The laser guns had a limited energy content, but as I depleted my own, I simply took possession of others, as the former bearers of them had fallen. And for what seemed like an age, such was the extent of the army descending upon us, I would successfully lay waste to them all, and eventually no further additions would emerge from the water. As I mentioned, absent of agreement ideas that I could be harmed, as they attempted to do so regardless, the experience would present this inability, in whatever simulated way it might, in this case, of my blasting my would-be assassins with laser guns. The entire foray could be construed as symbolic in regards to the altercation that took place, the mechanisms of assault, the laser guns, and the very body forms of the twisted hordes as ideas, and only according to agreement can the ideas become simulated outcomes. As the ideas, the laser blasts or body types hit home in regards to who stands and who falls. The attacking horde were defeated. One might say they were the instant backlash effect of their own decided actions, and this afforded the requisite time required for the completing of the calibrations and the launching of the human male. I would never see this take place, however, as I mentioned, with this being an astral projection-based endeavour, so my time was limited, and I would be pulled back into my physical level body, or rather my view now returned to the physical level as afforded via its encasement. But assured was it that the human would strike at the optimum position, this having the effect of fragmenting the idea that effected as the tyrant's dominion over the dimensional region he had claimed. Remove the idea, and the simulation also is absent, essentially ridding the creational dimension of the warlord and his ability to maintain his tyrannical hold. And there the experience would end.